So what we had discussed on Tuesday prior, we talked about how to solve two-step equations by, if they're set up in this standard equation format. A standard equation means that you have, the format ax minus, plus or minus b is equal to c. If it's set up in this standard form, then you always do the inverse of your constant first, so you're always doing addition or subtraction first, and then you're following it through with multiplication or division. Now remember the idea we said before, the whole idea of adding or subtracting is to create a zero pair. Okay, we add or subtract to create a zero pair. That's the whole reason that we do addition or subtraction to your constant. We're trying to change your constant into a zero pair. So if your constant was positive, then we would subtract. If your constant was negative, we would add. Okay? Then the idea of multiplying or dividing, we multiply or divide to create a positive 1. So write that down. You multiply or divide to create a positive 1 for your coefficient. The whole reason that we multiply or divide is so that we can create a positive 1 as our coefficient. And then we don't even have to write that 1 anymore. Okay, so for the example that we had here, instead of subtracting 11, we added 11 to both sides, which then created the equation 2x is equal to 16. And then from there, we divided both sides by 2, and we got x is equal to 8. Okay, so we saw those situations for problem number 1 and number 2 that we worked through. And then when we went to the back page, we came across problems like number 5 and number 7. What did we have to do with problems 5 and 7 first? If you turn your paper over, you should see it on there. What did we wind up having to do, Rashawn? We had to rewrite the equation. So let's take a look at that. For problem 5, we had to rewrite the equation because we had the variable on the right side instead of the left. We like having variables on the left side of the equal sign, not on the right side of the equal sign. So all we did is we just flip-flopped the left and the right sides. Okay, we didn't change any operations, we didn't change any signs. We still kept it 5 minus 3y equals 20 instead of 20 equals 5 minus 3y. And then we solve. Now notice again the whole idea that the reason we add or subtract is so that we can create a zero pair. Yesterday, several people thought, or not yesterday, sorry, Tuesday, several people thought that you'd add 5. But if we do 5 plus 5, does 5 plus 5 create a 0? No, it just creates a 10. So you have to focus on the invisible operation that happens to be in front of 5, which is that plus sign. And that's why we subtract. We're creating that zero pair here so that they can get crossed off, and then we subtract 5 from the other side. And then notice here, I kept the sign as a negative, and I divided by that negative. Because a negative divided by negative creates a positive. And of course, 3 divided by 3 would create the 1. If I just divided by a 3, I wouldn't have a positive 1 as my coefficient. I'd have a negative 1, and I would not be done. Okay, so you have to remember that with multiplication and division, you keep the sign. Okay, you work with the sign that they have there. If it's a positive, you divide by positive or multiply by positive. If it's a negative, you multiply or divide by that negative. With addition and subtraction, that's when you're looking at opposite signs. Okay, and we did the same thing for problem 7 down below. We subtracted 5 first, and then we divided both sides by negative 7. All right, so let's take a look at problems 3 and 4 and 6. So for problem 3, first thing I'm going to ask, do I need to rewrite? No. I have my variable on the left side. Everything's fine. So now the first thing I want to do is create a zero pair. What am I going to do? What inverse operation is going to help me create that zero pair? look back at your notes, and I even have examples up on the board right over here. Looking back, what do we need to do first? If I'm telling you to solve this, what are you going to do first? Say it louder. And what are we adding? 15. Thank you. If I don't start hearing some participation from you guys, we're going to take a quiz. So I need to start hearing some participation from you. May said that we have to add 15 to both sides. That's creating that zero pair. If it says minus 15, that's like a negative. We're going to add 15. That creates a zero pair. I can then box it and cross it off. On the other side, though, negative 29 plus 15. You guys need to do that. You need to be able to tell me what is negative 29 plus 15. If you've got your calculator out, it makes it a lot easier for you. Negative 14. That 2n is going to come straight down because it did not get affected at all. What's my next step? Step 2 is to do what? Hayden? Okay, so yes, we are doing negative 14 divided by 2. Proper way to say it, we are going to divide by 2 on both sides. The reason that we're dividing negative 14 by 2 is because we have to divide 2 by 2 to create a positive 1 for our coefficient. You have to divide the 2 by the 2, and whatever we did to one side, we had to do it to the other. So we're dividing the negative 14 by 2 as well. This creates a positive 1. That's why I can cross it off like it's a positive 1 for my coefficient. And I'm going to get that n is equal to negative 7. Okay, let's take a look at problem number 4. Do I need to rewrite? No. Variables on the left side, we're perfectly fine with that. What's the first inverse operation that we're going to do? Subtraction. Good. And what are we subtracting? 8. We're subtracting 8 from both sides. Now, I want to make sure you understand the reason we're subtracting is not because of this plus sign. The reason we're subtracting is because 8 has what in front of it? An imaginary what? An imaginary plus sign. It has an imaginary plus sign in front of it. That's the reason we're subtracting. Okay, even if this said minus x over 4, we would still be subtracting. Okay, because we have to do the inverse to what the constant is. That creates that zero pair. And then we're going to subtract 8 on the other side. Okay, so we're left with an x over 4 is now equal to 9. X over 4 equals 9. What's the next inverse operation that we're going to do? Multiplication. And what are we multiplying both sides by? 4. Okay, remember if I multiply by 4 and I divide by 4, that creates a positive 1 for my coefficient. And if I do 9 times 4, I'm going to get what? What's 9 times 4, guys? 36. Okay, we already did problem 5, so let's take a look at problem number 6. Okay, for problem number 6, we have negative 2 plus 4h is equal to negative 6. I don't need to rewrite because I already have the variable on the left side. So what's my inverse operation going to be? What's the first inverse operation I'm going to do? Addition. Who said addition? May. Why? Because there's a minus sign with the 2, right? Even though this has a plus sign here, I'll zoom in so you guys can see it a little easier. Even though this has a plus sign, I'm not focusing on this plus sign. I'm focusing on the sign that's in front of the 2. The sign that's in front of the 2 is a minus sign or a negative sign, so we have to do the opposite of it, which is to plus. So we're going to add 2 to both sides. Negative 2 plus 2 creates that 0 pair. You've created your 0 pair. You can cross those off. What we're left with is a positive 4h. Do I have to write the positive sign? No, so I can just write 4h is equal to, what's negative 6 plus 2? Negative 4. Good. All right, now what do I need to do? Felix, what? Come on. What's the inverse operation here? When they're side by side, what does that mean? If you've got 4h, what does it mean that we're doing? Are we adding them? Are we subtracting them? Are we multiplying them? Are we dividing them? So when they're side by side, we're what? Multiplying. Okay, so what's the inverse of multiplying? What's the opposite? Dividing. So instead of multiplying 4 times h, we're going to divide by 4. Okay? Divide both sides by 4. That creates a positive 1 for my coefficient. And then negative 4 divided by 4 gives me what? Jocelyn? Not 0. Negative 1. Negative 1. Okay? Multiplication and division will never give you 0 unless 0 is involved in the multiplication or 0 is being divided by a number. Okay, so if you're multiplying or dividing, you'll never get 0 as an answer unless 0 is a part of the problem. All right, what I want you guys to do is I want you to do problems 8 through 12 on your own. You're going to do 8 through 12 on your own, and then we'll go over it. So for problem number 8, the first inverse operation was what, guys? Say it. No, nobody? All right, so never mind.